Hello, 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 hello. So, I want to do this quickly so that I can go ahead and get started with this book reading. But for those of you who just saw the pictures of Dylan's bedroom, I want to show you this picture, but I want to go ahead and say beforehand, viewer discretion, because this is trigger warning, whatever, because this is not something that is pretty to see. And if you've not seen any photos of Dylan's injuries, it's shocking, it's heartbreaking, it's all of the above. All right, here we go. Shit, I'm talking about Xana's injuries. Y'all, I need to go to sleep. Do you hear me? I'm really losing it tonight. Well, for those of you who don't know what this is Xana's teeth that's circled in red. Above is her nose. Above that is her eyeball, literally coming out of her skull. Come down. This is her arm, shoulder, arm. This is blood all over her gray sweatshirt. In the original photo, you can see stab wounds through the sweatshirt arm. Xana was not burnt. That's blood. Juicy Heifer, here's a thing, Shug. Bless your heart. You being here and putting your 2 cents in says so much more about you than it does about the people who are here watching this, because they are genuinely interested in what happened to these 4 individuals. The fact that I have a picture on this screen right now of a deceased body who was absolutely butchered but fought like a hellcat for her life tells me everything I need to know about you. Whether you hide like a pussy that you are behind a fake ass profile or not. You're a cowardly puss who doesn't have the balls to say anything with your whole ass chest. When you grow a pair, come back. Till then, fuck off. Yes, I'm off.
Huh?
Okay, well, like I said, do that. There's plenty to eat.
I didn't say there wasn't.
She's not under a bed. Let me show you the original. Well, here's a different version. That is her. There's both blood and bruising on her face. Can you see this one better? And then there's one of the entire scene. This is the full picture and shows you the proximity of where she was and where Ethan was. Yes, there are stab marks in her sleeve. She was wearing a gray sweatshirt. I don't know. I didn't circle that. Somebody else sent me this. I don't know what it is that's circled, but that is where Ethan was laying. All right, let's get started on the book. This is part 2. The August effect. Xana's injuries. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I'm doing 30 things at once, as usual. All right, this is part 2. Tell me if y'all can hear this once it starts playing, please.
Part 2, The August Effect. October 9, 2023. Dear Amandes, in the abstract sense and via intuitive capacities, the August effect can be analogized to the gravitation of heart's promise unto the green pastures ahead. Always in your heart, Burns. Brian C. Koberger, letter to his sister, Latah County Jail. Chapter 6, The Vampire Diaries, Borg, Black Balaclava. Whatever happened inside 1122 King Road at 4 o'clock Sunday morning, only one survivor is known to have come face to face with the killer. According to widely scrutinized reports, Dylan Mortensen, a 19-year-old U of I sophomore, was standing in the doorway of her second-floor bedroom when a masked intruder, later determined by police to be Brian Koberger, passed within inches. In hopes of gathering additional information, law enforcement interviewed Mortensen at her residence in Boise 4 days after the crimes. Although the interview was recorded, and we will excerpt transcripts later, police saw fit to file supplemental 0003 paraphrasing statements. In the interest of clarity, it makes the best sense to read this report verbatim. On November 17, 2022, at approximately 12:05 p.m., myself, Idaho State Police Detective Victoria M. Gooch, and Moscow Police Department Sergeant Dustin Blaker interviewed Dylan Mortensen at her residence. The interview occurred with Ms. Mortensen's attorney present via computer, Robin McPherson, an attorney in Moscow, Latah County, Idaho, with a law firm, Sullivan Law Offices. The interview was also audio recorded by me and Sergeant Blaker. The thumb drive of this interview was assigned tag number 220004172 in the Tiburon Case Management System on November 20, 2022. The audio file of the interview had been downloaded onto the thumb drive on November 18, 2022, and the thumb drive was maintained in my sole care and custody until entered into evidence on November 20, 2022. Ms. Mortensen stated the following. She's a sophomore at the University of Idaho, studying pre-physical therapy. She's been a University of Idaho student for both years, freshman and this year. She had been residing at the residence where this incident occurred since August 2022. Her friend Bethany and she moved into the residence, and the other female roommates she knew through their sorority, Pi Phi, Maddie and Xana, prior to this year, and had also met Kaylee before, but Kaylee belonged to another sorority. She explained Kaylee was a senior in school. She described Xana as being a year older than herself. She also described two additional friends, Emily Allant and Josie, but they were not residents in the house. Dylan explained Emily Allant introduced her to Xana last year. Both Ms. Allant and Josie reside in the White's Apartments, an apartment complex on campus that houses sorority members. She described the layout of their residence and where each of the roommates resided. Quote, "When you walk in, there is a door. There is downstairs with a bathroom and Bethany's bedroom. When you walk into the door, there is a hallway with her bedroom and the kitchen and the sliding door, and upstairs is Kaylee's room and a bathroom and Maddie's room. Xana is on the same floor as her bedroom," end quote. Initially, she was asked to describe what the girls did on the 12th of November, but she described there was a ball on Friday 22, a Pi Phi sorority ball, which she briefly attended. She explained she started drinking at 4:30 p.m. on the 11th. She described the individuals at the ball, including her roommates, as well as Ethan and his triplet brother, Hunter, Emily, Josie, and her boyfriend, Lyndon, Jenna, Claire, Hayden, and Gideon, Yessie, Lisa, Matt, and Aaron, and their dates, who were Fiji fraternity members, Maddie Thornton, Lake, and Lake's date, Hayden. Kaylee Goncalves was Dylan's date for the ball. Dylan described how she got home on Friday night by using an Uber from the Pi Phi ball to their residence. She explained she and her roommates normally have Eric as their Uber driver, but not on the night of the 11th. She does not remember the name of the Uber driver on Friday night. This was around 8:30 p.m. She explained she and her roommates trust Eric. She advised the party initially transitioned to the White's Apartments, but she got bored and wanted to go home. It was she, Maddie, and Xana, and Ethan regarding the roommates who attended the ball. Eventually, a group from the Pi Phi event transitioned to Dylan and the other roommate's house, and there was a party that continued there until the early morning hours of November 12th, Saturday. She requested to look at her cell phone during this point in the interview to verify the timeline. She was advised she could use her cell phone to provide times during the interview. And playing music. She went to bed a little after 12:10 a.m. and then added that she went to bed sometime between 12:10 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. that morning, November 12th. Eventually, she advised Maddie Mogan came home and eventually Kaylee Goncalves, but she was not certain about where Kaylee was when she went to bed. She then explained on Saturday morning, November 12th, at approximately 12:15 p.m., she then corrected the time to 11:44 a.m. The roommates went together to get coffee and the store to get more alcohol. They still had champagne from the previous weekend, which she explained was U of I Parents' Weekend. She explained the plans for that Saturday night included a Sigma Chi fraternity party on campus. Dylan explained Kaylee was not going to this function because she was a senior, and typically seniors do not attend the fraternity functions on campus because they are old enough to go to the local clubs. Dylan explained she was going to the Sigma Chi party. Dylan further explained, at one point Maddie was at this function, but left the function to go to the club with Kaylee. They were all at the house together at 5 p.m. on Saturday, November 12th. Dylan stated Kaylee decided to go and take a nap, and she, Dylan, Maddie, Santa, Bethany, and she were on the couch watching a movie. Dylan explained they were all together Saturday afternoon at the house, and they all decided to take naps, and each of the girls set their alarms for 8 p.m. Dylan believes Ethan may have come over to the house at this time, but she was not certain if this is the time Ethan came over or if he showed up at a different time. Dylan explained she had an assignment due in her Psychology 215 course, so she posted the assignment at approximately 10:12 p.m. She believes she then left the house at approximately 10:30 p.m. Saturday night. When Dylan left the house, Kaylee was still there with one of her friends. However, Dylan does not know the friend's name. She described the friend was female and was nice. After leaving the house, she saw Maddie between their residence and the Whites' apartments, and Maddie was holding a box of White Claw while she was walking toward their house. She advised she talked to Maddie, and then Dylan continued to the Sigma Chi function. She believed Maddie was going back to their residence to get ready to go to the club with Kaylee. Sergeant Blaker asked Dylan to give more details about the route she took when she encountered Maddie, and she provided those details in this interview. She explained when she got to the Sigma Chi function, she wanted to meet up with Xana and Bethany, and she called Xana on her cell phone to find out which apartment they were in, and she was told they were in apartment number 4. Others who were at apartment number 4 at this time were Ethan and his triplet brother Hunter, Xana, Yessie, Gideon, Claire's friend. Dylan explained she and Gideon were going in and out of the front door of the fraternity lodge together for part of the night. Dylan explained there were not a lot of people at this function. She further explained after she met up with Gideon, and the two of them then went to Peter's apartment. She was with Ethan Chapin and Xana during part of the night, and Dylan explained Ethan had been trying to get in contact with his sister, one of the triplets, Maisie, because she had been upset about something and he was worried about her, but Dylan did not know what the issue was. She remembered Maisie told her brother she had not been answering her cell phone because she had been sleeping. She described Ethan as being very protective of his sister, as well as protective with all of the roommates. The group of them went to visit Allie, who she had previously met through Xana, and Kenzie was also there, including she, Yessie, and Gideon. Jenna, Claire, and Lake were also there, as well as Ava and Zach, Jenna's twin brother. When asked how much alcohol she had consumed, she explained she had been playing Rage Cage, which she described was a drinking game, and when she awakened from her nap, she consumed 3 White Claws with an alcohol content of 5%. She denied there was any drug use and stated Xana and Ethan used Adderall. She advised neither Maddie or Kaylee did drugs. She explained she nor Bethany never touched the stuff. She advised it was only she and Lake that went back to the residence using the Sobro. She did not believe anyone else was home. When the two of them got home, which she believed was sometime between 1:15 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., November 13th, she was intoxicated, and because of that, she does not remember what time it actually was, but she believed it was between the 2 times mentioned. She further advised she made popcorn in the kitchen, and she and Lakeland watched Vampire Diaries together. Approximately 20 minutes later, Bethany Funk returned home. The 3 of them laid down and continued to watch Vampire Diaries. She believes Lake may have walked home, and then she advised she does not know what time Bethany and Lakeland went to bed. She had already gone home to bed and does not know when Lake may have left or when Bethany went to bed. Approximately 2 or 2:30 a.m., she awakened because Maddie and Kaylee arrived home with grub truck food, and they had mac and cheese, which Dylan explained they normally got. All 4 of them were together, which included Dylan, Bethany, Maddie, and Kaylee. Dylan advised they were taking selfie videos. All the girls talked about getting grub truck food. She did not believe Xana and Ethan were home because their bedroom door was open and she did not see them, and she discussed whether she may have been mistaken about this fact, and then she said she was certain she saw their door was open and they were not home. She then went to bed, which she advised was after texting Eric, the Uber driver. Dylan looked at her phone to determine what time she had texted Eric, the Uber driver, and said her phone said 3:10 a.m. But after further discussion, Dylan admitted she was somewhat confused about whether she was using Moscow time or Boise time, and Dylan explained her timeline may be off by an hour because of the issue, specifically during this interview, referencing Boise time instead of providing the time it would have been in Moscow when these events were occurring on the 13th of November. She explained she uses Snapchat as well as her cell phone to communicate with her friends. She advised if there was a lack of texted communications on her cell phone, it was because she had transitioned to using the Snapchat app for her communication method. She advised her login information with Snapchat. She denied knowing her roommates' passwords to their cell phones. While they were together, they talked about ordering Grub Truck, and then she texted Eric, the Uber driver, at approximately 3:10 a.m. She explained she texted Eric, quote, "Are you driving by any chance?" End quote. At approximately 3:13 a.m., Eric texted her back. She then went to bed. She does not believe Eric ever came to their house because she never responded to his text about the fact that he was still driving. She advised Eric, the Uber driver, is in his 30s, is married, and has one child. She advised all of the girls knew him and liked him. Dylan advised she is not certain if she stayed awake to watch more Vampire Diaries episodes or if she went to sleep. She was not certain if she locked her bedroom door, and she was not certain if she locked the sliding door because she was the one who usually did, but she also volunteered in her statement that she believed that Moscow was a safe place, so the sliding door was not always locked. She does not remember if anyone locked the sliding door before she went to bed. She was the first to go to bed ahead of the other roommates. She explained that she previously had a lot of dreams where she had been kidnapped in her dreams, and she further explained these types of dreams started in high school, and she knew they were dreams, and she would let those things happen in her dreams because she realized they were dreams. She advised she does not suffer from anxiety and denied prior life trauma other than divorced parents. Dylan explained she was awakened to a noise sometime between 4 and 4:20 a.m. She was asked to explain the amount of alcohol she'd consumed before going to bed, and she again explained while she was playing Rage Cage, which included the White Claws, part of Lake's Borg, and maybe 2 or 3 more drinks, White Claws, at Allie's house. She denied drinking after she left Allie's house. She advised she had been consuming the alcohol until approximately 1:15 to 1:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. She denied drinking any more alcohol after she and Lake got back to her residence. At 4:22 a.m., she confirmed this information by looking at the texted communication on a cell phone. She texted Kaylee asking her, quote, "What's going on?" End quote. She advised her phone said 5:22 a.m., which she advised would have been 4:22 a.m. Moscow time. She advised around 4 a.m. or 4:20 a.m., she heard Kaylee singing and playing music. She heard who she believed was Kaylee walking up the stairs, and Dylan advised she heard Kaylee say, quote, "Someone's here," end quote, and she sounded frantic. Dylan described Kaylee's tone as somewhere between talking and yelling it. She believed it was Kaylee who was walking up the stairs with Murphy. She said she heard who she believed to be Kaylee running down the stairs. She advised Murphy was barking at this time. She does not believe Murphy is normally a barker. She further advised she believes it was Kaylee who was running down the stairs after she heard her say, "Someone is here." She further explained she does not know if she actually heard this or whether she was drunk and did not actually hear any of this. She heard the footsteps of who she believed to be Kaylee. She explained all the girls were at Doc Martens, and that is when she believed she was hearing Kaylee coming down the stairs wearing her Doc Martens because of the sound of the footsteps coming down the stairs. Dylan called Bethany at 4:19 a.m., then Xana at 4:20 a.m., Kaylee at 4:20 a.m., and then Bethany again at 4:20 a.m. Dylan advised Bethany told her about seeing fireworks. She texted Bethany a last time at 4:27 a.m. before she went to Bethany's room. Dylan then explained when she first opened the door and she said she did not see anyone. The second time when she opened the door, she heard who she believed to be Kaylee crying, and Dylan believed Kaylee was in the second floor bathroom. She then heard a male voice, which she stated she had never heard before, say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Dylan believed the unidentified male was in the bathroom and with the person who was crying. She believes it was Kaylee who was the one that was crying. Dylan stated that now she has gathered additional information. She now believes it was probably Xana who was crying. At the moment of hearing the crying, she stated she believed it was Kaylee who was crying. She advised she knows the male's voice was not Ethan's voice. She described the last episode of Vampire Diaries, and she remembered it was two males rescuing a female. She explained it was not violent. She advised the male figure in the last episode was wearing all black, but Dylan explained that was normal for the series. She is not certain whether she heard Murphy barking during the first time she opened the door, but she advised it was possible he was barking, but Murphy was moving away from the house. She described Murphy was a puppy, and Dylan had just met him in August. She could not describe Murphy as being skittish. She advised she opened and closed her door a total of 3 times, and the 4th time is when she left her bedroom to go downstairs to Bethany's bedroom. Dylan advised she continued to call and text her roommates, but received no answers. She advised the time she called and texted her roommates and the time span she advised would have been between 4:20 a.m. to 4:27 a.m. She advised she never thought about an intruder, and in her mind, she stated she was not processing what was occurring as threatening. She advised she believed the male was directing his conversation at who she believed was Kaylee. She advised she did not believe the male was directing that statement to her. In discussing why the offender did not harm her, it was discussed that it was possible the male knew her and wanted to protect her, and she said she understood that was possible, but she denied knowing who the suspect was. Dylan further explained she Snapchatted Ethan but received no answer from Ethan. Dylan thought Ethan was still either at Sigma Chi or was at home. She was not certain. The third time Dylan opened her door, she said her vision was blurry or fuzzy, but she advised she saw a figure of someone that was dressed in all black, and they were masked, and he was holding an item of what she initially perceived was a vacuum, but she said that it did not make sense to her. She described the suspect as not being muscular, but being skinny and toned like a basketball player. She further described him as being taller than her 5' 10" frame by at least 3 inches, so he would have been 6 feet in height. She advised he had to have heard her call Kaylee and Xana, and she thought he would have had to have heard her calling for them, and she was confused as to why he did not come to her room. She described the item the suspect was holding, which she advised was like a cylinder, and she remembered a cop talking about a bow, so she was trying to ascertain if what she saw was in fact shaped like a bow. Dylan further stated she thought that maybe it was a firefighter because of what Bethany told her about seeing a firecracker. She advised he would have been approximately 3 feet away from her, and she believed she saw him walking out the back sliding glass door. He had looked at her before walking out the back door. She was not certain if he could see her whole body or just her head. At 4:22 a.m., then Dylan corrected her time and stated at 4:23 a.m., she advised she texted Bethany and they conversed about someone wearing all black, and Bethany said something to the effect of, "What the fuck? Why is Xana wearing all black?" Dylan explained she was not certain if she had been dreaming this or if it was real. Dylan explained she saw the suspect holding something she believed to be a cylinder shaped and also shaped like a triangle at the bottom of the cylinder shape. She advised the suspect was approximately 3 feet away from her, and he looked at her, but he was walking out the sliding glass door when she saw him. She said she saw his eyebrows. At approximately 4:23 a.m., she texted Bethany, to tell her she saw a masked suspect in the house. Bethany responded at approximately 4:25 a.m., telling her to come to her bedroom and that it's better than being alone. Dylan then left her bedroom after opening her door the fourth time and ran to Bethany's bedroom downstairs. Dylan advised when she left her bedroom, she looked down the hallway to Xana's bedroom and could see Xana lying on her back in her underwear, but she thought at the time Xana was passed out. Dylan stated she never went into Xana's bedroom, and she could only see Xana from the hallway as she was running to get to Bethany's bedroom. She advised she was too scared to go into Xana's room, and she knew Bethany was awake, and she knew to go there because she was scared. She saw Xana was wearing her underwear, and she explained Xana was comfortable enough with the roommates that she would wear her underwear around them, so this was not unusual. When asked about the lighting conditions inside the residence, she advised that possibly Xana's light was on, or the party lights were on, and that is how she was able to see Xana, because otherwise she would not have been able to see her lying on the floor without any lights being on. She was not certain if the bathroom lights were on, but she was not certain what lights were on, if any. She advised Xana did not say anything. Dylan stated she did not think anything was wrong. She later offered she may have been able to see Xana lying on the floor because they also had a Sensi light, and it could have been she was able to see Xana from the Sensi light. She explained she was trying to determine what was real from everything that she had been talking about with Sergeant Blaker and myself. She advised she knew the time with Bethany, Kaylee, and Maddie were real because she has the video of them together. She was not certain how Lakeland, got home that day. She further explained she has been trying to piece together things because some things do not make sense to her. She stated that she is being truthful, but some of what she has been discussing, she is not certain is factual. She has been working through it to try to remember what happened. Dylan was asked if the first female who was crying was saying anything, and she advised no, the female was only crying, and the male was the only one talking. She described the item the suspect was holding was cylinder-shaped and was also triangular-shaped. She could not remember if the lights were on or off when she encountered the male suspect. She advised she does not know if this is even something she saw or it was something she dreamed. She advised the last time she saw Xana was at Allie's house at approximately 11:04 p.m. Dylan confirmed this by checking her cell phone. Xana had been holding a White Claw. She was with Kennedy at Allie's at 12:49 a.m. She further advised Xana and Ethan did not stay at Ethan's house with any frequency. Because of Ethan's grades, he could not reside at the fraternity. He had his own apartment, but she does not know where his apartment is because she had never been there. She knows Kaylee and Maddie were home when she went to bed, and Bethany, and from when she saw Xana lying on the floor, but she was not certain about whether Ethan was home. She advised she left Kennedy and Allie's house at approximately 12:49 a.m. to return home. Dylan stated she is certain at 3:11 a.m., which through discussion might have been 2:11 a.m. Moscow time. Bethany, Kaylee, Maddie, and she were all in the house. She was not certain about Xana and Ethan because she does not know when they came home. She denied perceiving a threat, even after encountering the male in the hallway. She said there were people coming in and out of the house all the time. She denied remembering what his face looked like and said she could see that his head and mouth were covered, but she could see his eyebrows, and further advised she was not certain she could see his nose. When asked if she knew what a balaclava was, she said no. So I asked Sergeant Blaker to show Dylan a picture of a balaclava from his cell phone, and upon looking at a picture of a balaclava, she said, quote, could have been it, end quote. She does not remember seeing his mouth or nose, but she could see his eyebrows. When asked if any of her roommates told her about prior incidents involving anything that occurred with them, and she advised Kaylee had told them, Dylan and the other roommates about an incident a month prior when she was outside with Murphy about a subject who had been watching her. This subject was in the apartments above the girl's residence. Dylan further explained that 2 or 3 weeks ago, while at Winco, Kaylee told her about a male subject who followed her from the Winco store all the way to Kaylee's car. Even when Kaylee went to leave, the subject was standing by Kaylee's car. Also, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, all of the roommates went to Starbucks together, and when they got home, their front door was wide open, and they do not believe it had been open when they left. She explained there were prior issues with the front door, so she said it was possible the door opened because there had been a snowstorm, and she explained possibly the wind caused the door to open. Also, when she got home, the washer was going, which she described was not unusual, but this also concerned her. She explained because of these things, they went to get Ethan's golf clubs to protect themselves when they searched the house. Dylan explained weeks prior to the 13th, Kaylee told the roommates she heard a woman scream, but no one else heard it. Dylan was asked if she was telling either Sergeant Blaker or I anything to prevent us from solving this, and she advised no, that she understood my question, and she advised that she knew she did not sleep through the whole incident because she has texted communications and other things that she knows would have required her to be awake. She advised she knows what she heard, especially about hearing who she believed was Kaylee crying and the male voice telling her he was there for her. She stated again, she does not know how much of what she had been telling us was not factual because she is still processing the events. When asked why she believed she was spared after the male suspect saw her, she said she does not know why, and she does not believe anyone ever tried to open her door during the time he was in the house, and he could easily have done so, and why he would have passed by her room multiple times. She volunteered that to come through the sliding glass door, the person would have had to have scaled a tall wall. She advised the suspect would have known her room would have been occupied because he appeared to have known the layout of the house. She also said it could have been someone who was in the house last year when other girls were living there in the house. She advised there was no one she knows who would have wanted to hurt the girls, and the girls were loved by everyone. She said she had never heard even rumors which were negative about any of the victims. When asked about Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack, Dylan advised the breakup was mutual, and they have their dog Murphy in common, and Jack comes to their residence and plays with Murphy, and he and Kaylee continued to be friends. When asked if they co-parented Murphy, she said yes. Kaylee told her the relationship with Jack had run its course. Dylan thought Jack had handled the breakup well because every time he came to their house, there did not seem to be an issue. Dylan advised that recently, Kaylee started talking to Mason Barstow, but Jack seemed okay with that. Dylan offered her DNA. Sergeant Blaker secured a swab from Dylan at the conclusion of the interview. She advised that it might be difficult to locate the offender's DNA because they had conducted a deep clean of their residence leading up to the parents' weekend. When asked about when the deep clean of the residence occurred, it would have been before the weekend of the crimes. She was advised there was evidence left in the residence, and she sighed and said she was glad to hear that there was evidence found at the scene. When asked if she would be able to provide a description to a police composite artist, she said she would not be able to describe enough of the suspect to be helpful. She further advised that the only thing she remembered about his face was that his eyebrows were bushy. She advised she was confused about why the offender would have taken the patio door out of the residence because of the drop-off from the patio. She advised she remembered that cars do come by their residence a lot, and she said there was a black truck driving past Bethany's window, and she further said she was not absolutely certain it was a black truck, but there was a vehicle that went by their residence, and she could see the taillights, but she did not remember if the headlights were on, but what drew her attention to it was the red lights on the back of the truck, and when asked if she meant the brake lights, she said yes. When asked what occurred after she went to Bethany's bedroom, She said they eventually fell asleep, and when she awakened, she was lying next to Bethany in Bethany's bed. She advised a friend of theirs, Sophia, and Sophia's mother are planning a memorial event, and that has helped her emotionally. She advised Bethany is crying a lot over this, but she has not been crying. When she awakened that morning, Bethany was next to her in bed. They were both too scared to leave Bethany's room to even go to the bathroom. She advised at approximately 11:23 a.m. Dylan then corrected the time to 10:23 a.m. Moscow time. Dylan said she texted Maddie asking her if she was up. At 10:29 a.m. Moscow time, Dylan texted Kaylee, quote, "Are you up?" End quote. She could tell her Snapchats were not being read when she was texting them through Snapchat. Dylan advised she called Emily Allant, one of her closest friends, about what happened that night with the masked man. Dylan advised she called Emily Allant, one of her closest friends, about what happened that night with the masked man. Dylan then explained when she reached out to Emily Allant in a text message, which Emily told her was at 10:50 a.m., but she thinks Emily was mistaken. Emily told her she would send her boyfriend Hunter Johnson to their house because of their concerns about what had occurred during that night. When Hunter got to the house, which she described was before noon, she is not certain if he came in through the unlocked door or had to use the code to the front door to get into the residence. And when he got into the house, he asked about the location of a knife, and she directed him to the knife. She advised she initially went upstairs from Bethany's bedroom with Hunter, and she advised when she saw Xana, she realized Xana had not moved since she saw her earlier. She was still thinking Xana was still passed out from being drunk. Hunter then sent Dylan downstairs. She advised Emily and Josie came over after Hunter came to the house because she had asked them to come to the house. She advised Hunter then came downstairs, and she could tell by his facial expression he had seen something, and he told them to call 911. Bethany was the one to call 911, and Dylan at one point said she was on the phone with police dispatch and that the dispatcher was asking her about a defibrillator. They told dispatch there were people unconscious. Dylan denied seeing Xana or any of the other victims' bodies. She advised they stayed in the house when the police arrived, and they, the police, were putting the tape up when they realized there had been a crime, and when they saw the ambulance arrive and leave, Hunter told them they would not leave unless there was no reason to stay. She then advised the vandal alert came out, and that is when they realized their friends were actually gone. She advised they all realized there had actually been a murder committed in their residence. She said Kaylee had a balcony, and she remembered looking at the pictures in the news, and Kaylee's curtains were all messed up. She thought the distance of the balcony to the ground may have been too much and brought too much attention if that is how the suspect made entry into the house through Kaylee's bedroom. When asked if she checked the house for anyone else when she initially came home for the night with Lakeland, and she was asked if she had to unlock the front door, and she advised she believes she had to unlock the front door to get into the residence. She advised when she first got home, she remembered the sliding glass door was closed, but she did not know if it was locked. She advised when she first got home, she went to Kaylee's bedroom to let Murphy out of Kaylee's room, and Kaylee's lights were on, and no one else was in Kaylee's bedroom. Murphy came back into the house after going outside. Sergeant Blaker asked Dylan about the login and username for the router of the Wi-Fi at the residence, and Dylan advised Kaylee was responsible for that bill. She further explained she nor Bethany were responsible for the Wi-Fi bill because they had just moved into the residence in August. Robin McPherson had some follow-up questions for Dylan outside of the interview, and as a result, the audio recording was turned off at 2:11 p.m. the same date. Dylan Mortensen was interviewed 4 times between Bethany Funk's 911 call on November 13, 2022, and Brian Koberger's change of plea hearing on July 2, 2025. This substantial body of first-person information does not include the grand jury testimony she provided in May 2023. All but the two initial accounts were recorded in the presence of her lawyer, but only her statements to the grand jury were made under oath. In more than 4 hours of seemingly disparate accounts, Dylan Mortensen never verified or even corroborated details of what she claimed to have witnessed that fateful Sunday morning. Police never asked her about what seemed to be glaring inconsistencies, never sought a deeper understanding of still undisclosed evidence, including a blood-covered jacket, a bracelet found on the floor of the spare downstairs bedroom, and shoes matching a tread pattern found in blood near her room. To this day, police have not once indicated in files, internal communications, peripheral interviews, or court filings that they doubted any part of her story. They have never considered her a person of interest. She has never been implicated in or charged with the crimes. Only two people know what happened inside 1122 King Road between 4 o'clock that Sunday morning when the murders occurred and Funk's call to 911. It is important, it seems to me, that these stories add up. Chapter 7. Rage Kill, Lurid Dreams, Detective Gooch. If justice is the realm of lawyers and courts, it seems reasonable to offer a bit of a primer on how the legal system works. Much of what the public knew about the case prior to the change of plea hearing came from court filings, so maybe that's the best place to start. Ann Taylor's office filed dozens of motions covering everything from supplemental disclosure to change of venue, exclusion of evidence, even prohibition of certain language, including the phrase bushy eyebrows, and all mentions of psychopath. Each of these petitions included a healthy dose of Latin, endless citations, and at least a few obscure references to case law that takes years of study to understand by lawyers who cost staggering amounts to hire. In lieu of law school, perhaps we can go over a few basic terms and phrases that seem to pop up over and over. One of the first might be voir dire, which refers not just to the fair and impartial selection of jurors, but also to an assumption that when someone raises their right hand and swears to tell the truth, they mean it. This is important because according to the United States Constitution, all Americans are considered innocent until proven guilty by a jury of their peers. No court will ever impanel a jury in this case, so voir dire will apply only to us as we weigh the facts in a truthful and objective manner. It is no small responsibility. Next, we have to consider that all Americans, including those accused of being monsters, enjoy certain protections under the Constitution. After more than 250 years of ups and downs, the Supreme Court has ironed out a great number of disagreements, turning Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, and 14th Amendment challenges into a body of case law that most consider the envy of the world. The standard for guilt is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and the most would call that a noble measure. No measure is perfect. Fairness and impartiality should be the objective of every investigation. Which brings us back to the matter at hand, a death penalty prosecution where the defendant changed his plea to guilty after 2.5 years of denial. Those who have followed Kohberger's prevarications seem split between acceptance of Bill Thompson's courtroom summary and the outrage after the guilty plea disclosures by police that seemed to foster doubt. Yes, the families have gained some measure of closure knowing the person behind their unspeakable loss has a name, but a name, here, feels insufficient. So then if we want to believe that justice is blind, we need to understand that it is also tedious, complicated, and prone to error. As we have seen with a knife sheath, experts cannot agree on what should be obvious facts, such as where evidence was found, let alone who handled it on its way to the lab. Maybe this is a perfect example of why America's founding fathers built rules and protections into their model of jurisprudence. Procedures that may seem cumbersome in a 3-month trial protect us from the days when hysteria-driven vigilantes incited otherwise normal citizens toward lynchings. No matter where one stands, the objective has to be truth, and truth has to be objective. If we believe in this system, we have to honor its rules. Toward that end, it seems appropriate to introduce a few more terms from our glossary of legal jargon. The accused, of course, would be Bryan Kohberger, who through due process was also determined to be the guilty. He was indicted by a grand jury at the direction of a prosecutor based on admissible evidence that was both material and circumstantial. Pursuant to a search warrant executed on various homes and properties, Kohberger was arrested, read a Miranda warning, confronted with probable cause, assigned a public defender, and held without bond until he changed his plea to guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout this process, a judge ruled on a broad spectrum of motions, navigating investigative vehicles that ranged from subpoenas and affidavits sworn out by affiance to writs of habeas corpus seeking extradition within rules of criminal procedure. Throughout this process, attorneys hired expert witnesses who submitted analyses of everything from blood spatter and autopsy and toxicology reports to witness statements, surveillance logs, social media postings, Google search histories, and chain of custody forms. Though most of these terms are common knowledge to the average American, some are not. The word stipulate, for example, requires a bit of clarification. Anyone who has witnessed a trial knows full well that lawyers seldom agree on anything. In fact, it boggles the mind how they argue over minutiae for days before suddenly standing up and admitting to the judge that they accept one or more things as given. In these rare instances, lawyers are said to stipulate, introducing a novel concept and a lesser-known term of art. In this case, both sides have stipulated that Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xander Kernodle were viciously murdered November 13, 2022, in a 3-story house at 1122 King Road, Moscow, Idaho. We can all now stipulate that on July 2nd, 2025, Bryan C. Kohberger pled guilty to those crimes and shortly thereafter was sentenced by Judge Hippler to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Those who have followed the case can stipulate that the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office believes Kohberger left DNA on a K-bar knife sheath at the scene, used a 2015 Hyundai Elantra to make his escape, and posed for a thumbs-up selfie at approximately 9:47 a.m. while dressed in a hoodie. We can stipulate that for a time, Ann Taylor disagreed. Based on what we know so far, we can stipulate that criminologist Paulette Sutton believes certain things about the crime scene that criminologist Brent Turvey did not. We can stipulate that Sutton thought bloodstains in common areas of the second floor may have been diluted with saliva from wounds inflicted upon Xana's nose and mouth. Turvey found this absurd. We can stipulate that Officer Nunez's initial report differs from what his body camera shows because Ethan did not kill himself and Hunter did not show Nunez the steak knife or say that he placed it on the table. We can stipulate that no one, including Detective Talbot, seems to have noticed the K-bar sheath in Maddie's bed until 3 weeks after the crimes when a December 6 ISP report claimed they did. We can agree that in 4 statements to police, Dylan Mortensen seemed to offer different information of what happened in the 8 hours between the crimes and the call to 911. In other words, few parties in this case agree on anything. So much for stipulation. Next on our list of legal jargon is in limine, a Latin term meaning at the threshold. In this case, the threshold is a 2.5-year lead-up to a trial that never was. According to rules of criminal procedure in all 50 states, a motion in limine may be submitted by either party asking a judge to rule on the admissibility of certain evidence before it is presented to a jury. Examples might include the criminal history of a defendant, offers of settlement, unsuccessful plea deals, things of that nature. The goal, of course, is to prevent unfairly prejudicial information from becoming guilt by insinuation. That only seems fair until you consider that when the penalty is death, attorneys will argue the most picayune assertions, desperate to make their case. It's up to the judge to sort things fairly. That is precisely what Judge Hippler did for 30 months, spending a good deal of time between January 2023 and July 2025 ruling on a string of petitions. Looking back, I can see how silly some of them seem, including Motion in Limine 4, in which Ann Taylor's office sought to prohibit the state from referring to Kohberger as a psychopath at trial. While this game of sticks and stones may seem petty, defense attorneys get quite serious about the manner in which their clients are described, especially those with spectrum disorders who tend to stare blankly at the wall. Kohberger's appearance has been the subject of widespread speculation, but the prosecution agreed not to take advantage, promising that based on present circumstances, they would refrain from offering courtroom diagnoses. Other motions addressed exhibits that could have significantly impacted the case. Motion in Limine 6, for example, was submitted by Becca Barlow of Ann Taylor's office in hopes of prohibiting an ISP laboratory expert named Rylene Nowlin from referencing, quote, touch, end quote, DNA. This motion specifically targeted assertions that Kohberger's DNA had been found on the K-bar sheath. Unlike Motion 4, it speaks to the heart of the case. Both the term touch or contact DNA or any opinion regarding how DNA ends up on an item is misleading, Barlow wrote in a document filed February 24, 2025, in that it assumes facts that must be proven would be confusing to the jury and waste substantial time in debunking the testimony of an expert that is outside the purview of the field expertise and qualifications. Barlow's objection was filed long before Dr. Turvey discovered the apparent chain of custody issues that well might have led to exclusion of the sheath and DNA found upon it. Furthermore, the opinions of this expert have not been disclosed to Mr. Kohberger, Barlow wrote. As set forth below, the how and when DNA arrives on an object cannot be scientifically determined and is not the proper subject of expert testimony. The use of this language confuses and misleads the finder of fact and is barred by the rules 402, 403, as well as due process, in that the evidence is overly prejudicial. For those wondering how it might be unfairly prejudicial to suggest a person could transfer DNA to a sheath by touching it, there are other questions too. Why is the defense entitled to know a laboratory expert's opinion prior to them taking the stand? What makes one person an expert when other experts refute them? What the hell are rules 402 and 403, and why would a juror care? The answers lie within the body of Barlow's 11-page motion. In what otherwise might look like a grad school dissertation, she uses case law, citations, and various forms of logic to attack the foundation of the prosecution's case. Current DNA technology cannot conclusively answer the question of when DNA was deposited on an item or by what mechanism, i.e., direct or indirect transfer, she wrote, quoting the state's own report. It is possible the DNA detected on M2022-4843, item 1.1, resulted from secondary transfer. However, based on Nowlin's training and experience, it is her opinion, given the quantity of DNA detected on M2022-4843, item 1.1, 0.168 nanograms per microliter, and given the DNA profile obtained as single source, it is more likely the result of a direct transfer. For whatever reason, Barlow mentions the FBI's combined DNA index system, CODIS, but not the fact that DNA swabbed from the sheath failed to meet the minimum requirements for what is known as YSTR submission. By a lot. She did, however, make a point to cite numerous academic journals, including one that claimed it is impossible to determine from quantity alone how Kohberger's DNA might have ended up on a sheath. The authors of DNA Transfer, Review and Implications for Casework introduced the concept of trace DNA, defined DNA that cannot be attributed to an identifiable body fluid. The authors rejected the term touch DNA as misleading, as such a term infers that the DNA recovered from a surface got there via that surface being touched, but this is usually not known. Interesting. But if motions like this demonstrate how far Koberger's team would go to limit what the jury could see, others seem almost absurd. Motion in limine 7, for example, mentions placement in the 4th Judicial District of the state of Idaho in and for the county of Ada, and cites the title, Witness Identification by Bushy Eyebrows. Comes now Brian C. Koberger, wrote Elisa G. Massoth of Ann Taylor's office. By and through his attorneys of record, and pursuant to the Idaho Rules of Evidence, moves this honorable court for an order in limine, excluding any evidence referencing bushy eyebrows. More specifically, the defense asserts Rules 403, 601, and 602 of the Idaho Rules of Evidence bar witness DM from using the words bushy eyebrows or identifying Mr. Koberger in that manner. Why, among all the issues introduced to this point in the story, would it seem necessary to focus on the mere mention of bushy eyebrows as prejudicial to Koberger's case? Massoth summarizes things so we don't have to. On November 13, 2022, DM was inside the house when the murders occurred and saw a figure dressed in black when she peeked out of her bedroom door around 4 a.m. Shortly after seeing the intruder, she went downstairs to BF's room. The two girls fell asleep. Roughly 8 hours later, a 911 call was made from BF's phone at 11:56 a.m. More than 8 hours after seeing the intruder, DM was interviewed by law enforcement at the scene and at the police department. This much we know. What we did not previously know is that on February 24, 2024, the date of this filing, Taylor's defense team was grasping at straws. When describing the intruder to Officer Nunez at the scene, Massoth wrote in reference to Mortensen, she described the height, build, and clothing of the intruder. Her description did not mention eyebrows. This is important because initial reports are usually the most accurate, and Nunez's body camera recorded every word. What seems harder to understand is why Taylor thought a terrified 19-year-old co-ed would immediately mention eyebrows as the foundation of her story. Later, when she was interviewed at the police department, Detective Mowry inquired about facial features and asked DM if she knew what color the intruder's eyes were. She did not know the color of the intruder's eyes or eyebrows. Everything was kind of blurry, like I don't fully remember it. During the Mowry interview, DM again mentioned that she was in and out of it because she was so tired. This makes better sense in a legal argument, because DM is obviously Dylan Mortensen, and her statements did appear to change over time, to the point where she eventually claimed she did not know what was real and what was imagined. Witness credibility should always be a point of contention, and Taylor's team wasted no time attacking Dylan's. Taylor wrote, on November 17, 2022, 4 days later, DM was interviewed by Detective Gooch and indicated that she was really asleep and probably very drunk when she woke up around 4 a.m. on November 13, 2022. Throughout the interview, DM expressed uncertainty about what she heard and saw and did not know if it was real or if it was a dream or if her mind was playing with her. Now comes, an attorney might say, the grist for fascination. While the prosecution tried to make sense of Koberger's state of mind that fateful morning, the defense went after Dylan's. Law enforcement took pictures of DM's room on November 13, 2022, and November 19, 2022. On the walls of her room were many pictures of eyes with prominent eyebrows, many of which she had drawn. Some of the eyebrows are heavy, voluminous, puffy, or perhaps subjectively bushy. According to Detective Lake, he found, quote, artwork of human figures with emphasis upon the eyes and eyebrows were pinned to corkboards, end quote. Clearly, Massoth was trying to insinuate doubt, but understatement fails the objective. Photographs clipped from magazines and posted on Mortensen's wall feature prominently bushy eyebrows on 7 different faces. Among colored pencil drawings made and tacked to the board, 5 depict women with similar features. Though not mentioned in Massoth's motion, a corkboard in the second-floor bathroom shows more of the same. Apparently, eyes were a thing at 1122, but Massoth's assertions were just the foundation for a broader legal assault. Underscoring the legal research, critical thinking, and countless hours of analysis that go into every defense, she continued. When the Manson-Biggers balancing test is applied to the facts of this case, there is no reliable witness identification. As explained in detail above, DM's opportunity to view was seconds at most. Her attention was influenced by alcohol and sleepiness, and the only identifying attributes are height in relation to her own, a skinny athletic build, and a bushy eyebrow. These general descriptors could fit millions of individuals. Indeed. In fact, it seems hard to believe that had the case gone to trial, Bill Thompson would have reached this low to make his case. Kohberger had a considerable number of identifying features that distinguished him from other potential suspects. His height and weight would not necessarily have singled him out, but his nose might have. If Mortensen saw only one eyebrow, it was likely because his head was turned, meaning he appeared in profile. Even without Judge Hippler's ruling, it seems plausible that Ann Taylor could have refuted Mortensen's identification based on his profile alone. Massoth wrote of Mortensen, "Her uncertainty is repeated in each interview, and at least 8 hours passed before she interviewed the first time. 6 weeks passed before she was interviewed by law enforcement the final time, and 6 months passed when she testified before the grand jury. Balancing the Manson-Biggers factors, there is no reliability of the physical characteristics that DM has reported. There is great risk that at trial, in front of a jury, her testimony will be viewed as a clear identification of Mr. Kohberger. This would be a false identification and would prejudice the proceedings in a way that must be avoided." When a ghoul commits murder, we want to believe in the dedication and the credibility of the people we hire to find him. We want to trust that cops will be at least as competent as our heroes on TV. We want to have faith in lawyers for both sides as they fairly present facts in front of judges who keep an eye on rules and decorum until juries sort it all out. We want to hope that if we were ever accused of a crime, justice would be done in a manner we could accept. Whatever one thinks about the validity of Brian C. Kohberger's motions in limine or the impartiality of Idaho's criminal justice system, one thing remains certain. With the exception of a change in venue, Ann Taylor's efforts were for naught. In each and every instance, Judge Hippler ruled against her. On November 19, 2022, ISP Detective Brady Walker telephonically contacted Lakeland Ashley McComas in the presence of ISP Detective Andy Hodel. His report documenting McComas' recollection of events leading up to the crimes at 1122 King Road was filed the same date. It is here transcribed verbatim. McComas started at the University of Idaho, U of I, the year before and met Madison Mogan and Xana Kernodle through her sorority, Pi Beta Phi. She grew close with Kernodle. She met Kaylee Goncalves around the middle of August 2022. She met Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk through her sorority the year before, and their relationship grew closer after the start of the school year, August 2022. McComas visited 1122 King Road at least once every weekend and described it as, quote, a party house, end quote. She would usually arrive at the house before other guests. The parties consisted of playing games and drinking. McComas described the parties as people mingling with each other and playing beer pong and being more relaxed than rowdy or rambunctious. There were only a few occasions where McComas would go there to simply watch a movie or do something other than party. The parties occurred about once a week, on Friday or Saturday, and were normally attended by 20 to 30 people. The parties were normally attended by the same 20 or 30 people. If a person showed up randomly to the party without being invited, they would not be allowed to stay. McComas had not been there when that had happened. She knew of a house close by where Kernodle had lived the year before, where athletes would show up at a party if they heard about it. However, they were not welcome and were asked to leave. McComas later texted me a picture of a map of the neighborhood and circled the residence where Kernodle lived previously. The address for the house she pointed out was 1118 King Road. McComas said Mortensen was dating a male named Quinn, who lived in Boise, and thought they had dated for a couple of years. She had not met Quinn and did not believe he had visited Moscow. Mortensen would usually visit Quinn during school breaks. The only complaint Mortensen had about Quinn was how much he played video games. McComas did not believe Mortensen had a relationship with another male during this time. Funk did not have a boyfriend at the time. Ethan Chapin stayed with Kernodle almost every night. McComas did not see Chapin and Kernodle on Saturday night, November 12th, but had seen them on Friday, November 11th, and described their relationship as good. She described Chapin as good. She described Chapin as helpful to the other girls and said he seemed to fit in the house without any issues. McComas had met Mogan's boyfriend a couple of times and had last seen him at homecoming at the beginning of October. She didn't know Mogan that well, and they did not have deep personal discussions. McComas had not met Goncalves' boyfriend. When McComas was at the house, Goncalves was usually gone or upstairs in her room. On the night of November 12th, McComas was at another house party with some other friends. McComas later sent me a picture of the location of the other house party, which was at 427 Taylor Avenue. Mortensen listed the attendees of that party as Kennedy Fitzgerald, female, Hayden Edwards, male, Jenna McClure, Claire Cirillo, and eventually Mortensen. There were potentially other attendees, but she did not know everyone, so she could not remember. All attendees were students. At this time, McComas thought Chapin and Kernodle were still at the Sigma Chi party. When McComas left 427 Taylor Avenue, she and Mortensen got a ride from a sober freshman in a fraternity to 1122 King Road. She could not remember the make of the car. McComas could not remember exact times that she left the party and went to 1122 King Road. She had taken videos and photographs that night and said the timestamp from the last video at 427 Taylor Avenue was at 11:54 p.m. The timestamp from the first video at 1122 King Road was 12:43 a.m. When McComas arrived with Mortensen at 1122 King Road, she went straight to the bathroom on the main floor. They entered through the front door with a keypad lock. Several other people have the front door code, and the sliding door on the main level had not been locked when she was there. She believed Funk got home after she and Mortensen, but knew they all arrived around the same time. She was not aware of anyone else being home and stayed on the main floor the entire time she was there. After McComas went to the bathroom, they went to the kitchen, where Mortensen had made popcorn. McComas sat on the floor and played with Murph, Goncalves' dog. She thought that Mortensen had let Murph out. After the popcorn was made, they went to the living room and started watching Vampire Diaries. They didn't have much conversation while watching the movie. McComas took several selfies and videos. After leaving, McComas walked back to her sorority house, Pi Beta Phi, at 517 Idaho Avenue. The timestamp on the last photograph she took over King Road was 1:33 a.m., and the first stamp from media at her sorority was 2:19 a.m. She estimated it took about 15 minutes for her to walk home. While McComas was at 1122 King Road, she was only aware of Mortensen and Funk being present and did not see or know of anyone else being at the house. She left through the front door and did not see anyone of note while walking home. After leaving 1122 King Road, she did not hear from Funk or Mortensen until after receiving the vandal alert the next day. McComas could not think of anyone who would be capable or involved in this incident. She also could not remember any instance of one of the victims mentioning a stalker or anything of that nature. McComas sent me several screenshots of social media contacts and contact cards for some of the people she mentioned. She also sent pictures and videos she took that night at 427 Taylor Avenue and 1122 King Road as well as the previously mentioned app screenshots. The audio recording of the interview, as well as the photographs sent, were saved with this report, Supplement 62, and will be submitted to evidence at the Moscow Police Department. Though statements by McComas and others helped police build victimologies and timelines, they added up to little more than a circumstantial composite of the case. At the end of the day, a judge and his jury want evidence, and no matter what the lawyers argue, the best evidence is forensic. Returning to the crime scene, we quickly see that therein lies the problem. Paulette Sutton and Dr. Turvey agreed on almost nothing about what the evidence shows. Back to my interview with Ann Taylor's criminologist. Immediately, Turvey said, when asked how soon after examining the K-bar sheath he moved on to broader doubts. Immediately. Broader doubts included the manner in which Kaylee and Maddie had been killed. The wounds were disproportionate, they were oddly symmetrical, and he believes they could not have been caused by one knife. Turvey felt certain that the bodies had been posed. Once you look at the knife, he said, and you just sort of back out, you can see one of the victim's heads was all bloody and her pillow was all bloody, but the two did not match as police found them. Kaylee's head had been moved after all the blood soaking ended, meaning after she was dead, and then one body was moved on top of the other. Kaylee on top of Maddie's right arm as if they were cuddling, and then the sheet, of course, had been drawn over them. What about the liquid blood on the comforter, I asked. How is it possible that police would have found liquid blood pooled in a porous surface 8 hours after the crime? Is that normal? I wouldn't say there is anything normal about a crime scene like this, he responded with a shrug. But Kaylee suffered significant injuries that led to a tremendous loss of blood, so it's not that uncommon. It depends on the material the comforter was made up of, the type of fabric the blood pooled in. The medium of the barrier itself matters. Cotton acts differently than polyester, but on top of that, what's the temperature in the house? What's the humidity? All these things come into play, which provides the perfect opportunity to pause and talk about environmental factors, which the police seem to have overlooked. Things like illumination, precipitation, and ambient temperature certainly come into play when considering the crime scene as a whole. The kitchen door was supposedly left open for 8 hours, with snow on the ground, for example, creating questions about what was tracked in or out. Darkness would have been an issue for anyone sneaking around through the bushes. According to online sources and a weather report in Bill Thompson's file, it was 28 degrees Fahrenheit at 4 a.m. in Moscow the morning of the murders. Skies were overcast with light fog, winds 5 miles per hour out of the south, with nautical visibility of 6 miles and humidity of 89%. The moon was waning gibbous, with 82.5% relative illumination. Cloud cover would have made the early morning sky feel dark, cold, and wet. Foreboding. As ring cam footage from 1112 King Road so clearly shows, the killer would have found conditions just about perfect for getting in and out undetected. And before dismissing weather as superfluous to forensic investigation, remember what Dr. Turvey said about the coagulation process of blood. The temperature and humidity inside that house played a factor in how quickly Kaylee's blood dried on the comforter. And just because police may have skipped over important clues does not mean we have to. According to Officer Nunez's body camera, witness statements, and published reports, the sliding glass door on the second floor of 1122 was found wide open. The only thermostat for the entire house was attached to a wall in the kitchen, approximately 12 feet away. At least one crime scene photograph taken by the Idaho State Police shows the thermostat set at 69 degrees. Common sense dictates that under those circumstances, the heating system, which worked normally, would have read cold air from the outside, pumping heat for 8 hours straight. If the main door was open downstairs on the first floor, as witness Justin Nadeau claimed, the effect would have been even more pronounced. The heat would have been running nonstop, making the third floor, where police found Maddie and Kaylee, unbearably hot. That appears not to have been the case, because neither Nunez nor Warner mentioned anything about the temperature of the house, either on camera or in their reports. Neither does Detective Talbot or anyone else who entered to process the scene. Let's stick with the bodies and what they tell us about the crimes, Turvey suggested, admitting that high temperatures would have made pooled blood dry much faster. At least for now. It's natural for all those questions to come rushing in with a case where it's all so complex, but we will come back to that later. Dr. Turvey is not easily distracted. He thinks linearly, as one might expect of a scientist with 3 decades of experience making sense out of chaos. He likes to look macroscopically at the mechanism and context of a crime before zeroing in. He calls it coarse graining. This all starts in the 3rd floor bedroom with Kaylee and Maddie, so we start there too, he explained. Based on timeline and logic, this has to be the first place a crime occurred. They are attacked and stabbed to death right next to each other. That much is obvious. But the idea that one woman is violently attacked and killed while the other is sleeping, that she doesn't wake up and do anything, doesn't fight back, doesn't even respond, that's nonsense. These 2 women are right on top of each other in a small bed, and it's obvious that neither of them ever left the bed. Kaylee was asphyxiated to the point where blood vessels burst in her eyes and lips. Then she was severely beaten before being stabbed and cut dozens of times. Maddie never woke up. We are supposed to believe one killer smothered and beat and hacked at Kaylee while somehow dealing with Maddie too? There has to be a second person involved, he opined. Turvey cited ISP reports to bolster his conclusions, which he considers fact-based and obvious. He said he followed the evidence as it was presented, building chronology as he tracked what he believes were the killers through the house. So once they get out of that room, he says, they go down the stairs to the 2nd floor. And where do they end up? Where do they arrive? In the kitchen. What happens when they get there? As Nunez's body camera shows, the killer or killers would have turned left, moving out of Mogan's bedroom, taking 4 or 5 steps before turning left again and walking down the fold-back stairs. It is plausible to think the killer would have stopped at Dylan's room when he got down to the 2nd floor, especially if she heard him and got up to open her door, as she has stated. Based on Bill Thompson's narrative, this is not what happened. In the kitchen, you have Xana eating her food, and she's in there on TikTok, and that's when she sees who it is, Turvey surmised. And she runs down the hallway, and the killers are covered in blood. They have blood on their hands. They've got blood on their clothes. They've got blood on their faces. They have their knives and whatever other weapons they were carrying, which we don't even know because there were no weapons recovered at the scene. But she sees them, sees the weapons, and she runs down the hallway toward Ethan to wake him up and get help. The offender is able, I think, to get close enough to injure her, which is why we have her blood in the living room, on the walls, and some of the horizontal surfaces. As previously documented, Xana's blood was found on the side edge of the folding white table. According to Sutton, at least, the state believed she was injured while fleeing to her room. That's either the offender tracking her blood out after the murder in her bedroom or leaving it as he first attacked her, Turvey said. Either way, she gets further attacked in her bedroom and she gets taken apart. This is a battle where she fights so fucking hard and there's blood everywhere. She's stabbed and she's got defensive wounds and all kinds of injuries. Ethan was in bed. He never gets out of bed. So either he never wakes up, which is almost impossible based on what's going on, things crashing, Xana screaming. Either he doesn't wake up, or the other offender gets in there, holds him down, and stabs him a few times, and he's done. To me, it's not a reasonable inference to suggest that he slept through the violent, destructive, screaming murder of his girlfriend. That's just not reasonable. It all happens right next to his body. Turvey seems right. None of this makes sense until one addresses other important considerations. The women on the 3rd floor both suffered what a behavioral analyst might identify as rage kill injuries, signature wounds. Both women had their throats slit from ear to ear post-mortem, twice. Each of them had nearly identical gashes on one of their shoulders. This is very interesting, Turvey said with a nod. It tells us a great deal about the killers. You are seeing actions play out from more than one offender. Before dismissing this as yet another expert opinion, we should stipulate that among Turvey's 22 bound publications is a 753-page text called Criminal Profiling, an Introduction to Behavioral Evidence Analysis. He is not only a court-certified professor with a PhD in behavioral analysis, he literally wrote the book on this topic, which lines up with a corkboard representation of several attractive women and their necklines and their shoulders, Turvey said, referring to images on Dylan's bedroom wall. These appear oddly similar to specific patterns of injury documented in autopsy reports. It is difficult to overlook similarities between these images in the bedroom and specific wounds on the victims. According to Turvey, self-similar indicators like this are found throughout the house. He specifically noted things like the deliberate posing of Mogan's and Goncalves' bodies and the infliction of signature wounds post-mortem. He pointed to the fact that Xana's partially naked body was left spread eagle in the doorway to her room, while Ethan's was covered up with blankets after the killing had ended. Why does this matter, he asked? Because people will tell you who they are pretty quickly, and you should believe them. All these strange things you see at the crime scene were acted out by the killers. You're seeing a behavioral portrait of the people who did this. What about Ethan? Why would a killer inflict gruesome wounds only to cover him up? Because they're trying to hide it, the fact that he was butchered on the bed, Turvey opined. Remember, the original call to 911 was that a roommate had passed out, right? Turvey believes a possibility is that this may have been done to create the illusion that there was nothing visibly wrong, to stage the scene. The killers are trying to hide Ethan's injuries, he said. So if you're looking down the hall, you might come to the same conclusion. Was he referring to the two surviving witnesses? Was his opinion that Funk and Mortensen could have known more than they told police? Turvey is solely expressing his opinion here. Neither Funk nor Mortensen has ever been implicated in wrongdoing. He believes they may have been trying to cover. Yes, he said, to say, hey, I just looked down the hall and this is what I saw and this is what I thought. The problem is, even if you look down the hall, you could see the blood is everywhere. It's just a nightmare. And then the 911 call becomes just utter nonsense. A roommate is passed out from drinking and wouldn't wake up? That's literally what Funk told 911. It's on tape. How else do you explain that call? The Xana is passed out on the floor of her room and won't wake up? She's covered in blood, lying in blood. There's blood all over the room. And this girl has enough information about her roommate to tell 911 she is passed out and unresponsive, yet she doesn't see all those gruesome wounds? Turvey was no longer trying to come up with theories. He had already formed his own opinions. In his mind, this had moved past the point of accusations. He was hired by the defense to poke holes in Bill Thompson's case, and that is exactly what he did. He filed his report as a statement of expert opinion based on forensic evidence and documented behaviors. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, he cautioned. Before moving on to the survivors, he wanted to address the house itself. How does the offender get in? He asked. That's the first problem. They've got to have a code to the front door or a key or something, because nothing is broken, nothing is disturbed. Not only that, but the house had been redesigned from top to bottom, meaning the floor plan would not have been widely known to people who had been there during previous semesters. And why go straight up to the third floor, ignoring Dylan's room on the second? Because they had a target, an objective, Turvey asserted. The people responsible for these crimes had to have knowledge of the house. Getting up to the third floor is not that hard, but then you have to look through the rooms as you go, passing Kaylee's room until you get to Maddie's. What about Xana? Ethan? They were killed far from that scene downstairs at the other end of the house. Exactly, Turvey said. Why? Because once they're done, the killers come down to the second floor and see Xana and realize, oh my God, these people know who we are and they recognize us and they're witnesses, so we've got to kill her too. Then Ethan, who never gets out of bed, while she's fighting for her life on the floor? The only way that works is that there is more than one killer, and the only plausible reason is that they are witnesses. Then there is the issue of what appears to be a cleanup of the whole second floor. There's no doubt about that, Turvey said. The killers cleaned up the common areas of the second floor, which means they had to have the ability, the motivation, and the time. All that diluted blood with an unknown substance? The substance was water, or a cleanser of some kind. They washed off the walls, the floors, the table, everywhere except where the actual killing occurred. They cleaned up the first floor bathroom, which we haven't even gotten to yet. And we're meant to believe 2 survivors waited 8 hours before calling police while all of this is going on? Never heard a thing? How is that possible? It's a compelling question. How did all of this happen in less than 4 minutes, as the prosecution alleged? It didn't, Turvey said. It did not happen in 4 minutes. The prosecution's narrative makes no sense whatsoever. You see that in Sutton's rebuttal to my report. They have no reasonable explanation for holes in their own data. And here is the point in any conversation about the Idaho murders where things start to go south. All the normal questions about who, what, when, where, and why start to break down and meld into one overwhelming question. How? How did Brian C. Koberger break into the house at 1122 King Road sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning, find his way upstairs, ignoring Dylan's room along the way, and silently butcher 2 women 8 feet above her bed? How did he kill Ethan, a 6'4", 228-pound former high school football player, while his girlfriend fought for her life on the floor beside him? How did Koberger clean all the blood off the living room walls, the floors, the beer pong table, and the knee wall ledge, only to inadvertently place a White Claw box atop a couple stains he missed? How did he transfer Ethan's undiluted blood to the top of the stairwell? Who sterilized the first floor bathroom? Why did they do it? And how is it possible that police did not seem to care? How did Brian Koberger escape, drive to his apartment, and ultimately make it all the way back to Pennsylvania without transferring a single cell of DNA from any of the victims? I actually know the answer to that, Dr. Turvey said, nodding confidently. In fact, I tried to explain it all to Ann Taylor. He claims she wouldn't listen. Listen to what? Didn't she hire him to poke holes in the prosecution's case? Yes, and I believe we have done that ably, he said, but none of what I or the rest of the team found seemed to matter. 4 days after presenting our findings about the knife sheath and the blood spatter analysis and overwhelming contradictions at the scene, her client decided to change his plea, take the deal. It shocked me, to be honest. I heard about it on the news, just like everyone else. Wait. If a PhD in criminology presented compelling evidence to Koberger's lawyers proving the case against him was so problematic, why would Ann Taylor let her client possibly ignore it? What would be the rationale in allowing a client to accept life in prison without the possibility of parole? We'll get there, Turvey assured me. We will. Trust me, we will. He'd been thinking about this for months. It haunted him. Before we do, he said, we have to look at what the 2 witnesses tell us. Forget about Dylan for the time being. We need to focus on her roommate. Chapter 8. Baby Daddy, High Noons, Firework. Bethany G. Funk was a 19-year-old U of I sophomore at the time of the murders. A native of Reno, Nevada, she had just moved to 1122 King Road in August 2022, pursuing a Bachelor of Arts degree with a major in public health. Like so many of her peers, she was a member of the Greek community, having pledged Pi Beta Phi sorority, where Maddie Mogan was her big. By all accounts, Bethany enjoyed a rich social life that included close relations with the other women in the house and friends in neighboring apartments. She regularly attended on-campus functions, including house parties like those thrown at 1122. She slept by herself in a bedroom on the first floor of the house, had exclusive use of a bathroom, did not own a car. Beyond that, what we know about Bethany Funk's movements on November 13 comes directly from what she told police. Officer Mitch Nunez recorded her initial interview on his body camera outside the house around noon Sunday, but she was interviewed again an hour later at the Moscow PD. According to Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, Supplemental 89, Funk told Officer Dustin Blaker about her movements Saturday night, what she witnessed Sunday morning, and why it took 8 hours to call 911. Blaker's interview establishes Funk's first real account of what she witnessed. It was the last time she spoke to police without a lawyer. After logging personal information, such as height, weight, and date of birth, Blaker wrote, "On November 13, 2022, at around 13:47 hours, I interviewed Bethany Funk at the Moscow Police Department in regards to the death of 4 of her roommates. Bethany is a resident of 1122 King Road. Funk was home, sleeping in her room, located in the basement floor of her residence when the crimes occurred." Just the facts is a great approach to any investigation, but Blaker's report seems to be missing a couple big ones, like dates. Without context, it shifts timeline, moving from the house to events that are not otherwise defined. We can surmise that he was referring to Saturday night. Bethany went to the Sigma Chi party at around 20:30 hours, he wrote, with Ethan Chapin and Xander Knodel. They hung out in an apartment for a while together, and then Bethany went up to the main part of the fraternity to hang out at the party. Maddie and Kaylee went to the corner club together, not sure when they left. Bethany did not see Ethan or Xana at the party and left to go to Kennedy Fitzgerald's residence at 427 Taylor Avenue. Bethany walked home around 1-ish, and when she got back to 1122 King Road, Dylan and Lakeland McComas were at the residence, and they all watched a movie together. None of this differs substantively from what Funk told Nunez on camera, but cops tend to rely on interpretations of statements more than the statements themselves, and all too often, those interpretations become fact. What Funk said and what Blaker heard seem to differ significantly. Prosecutor Thompson's narrative is based almost entirely on what his investigators wrote down. Blaker continued, "Maddie and Kaylee got to the house at approximately 01:45 or 0200 hours. Lakeland left the house and Dylan went to bed." This appears to be a bit of a misunderstanding. Bethany actually claimed she was uncertain about specifics due to her inebriated state at the time. She remembered walking home by herself, but did not know exactly when Lakeland left or where Dylan was when Maddie and Kaylee returned. Bethany said she'd had a lot to drink, running down a list of alcoholic beverages that included mimosas, a 12-pack of High Noon seltzers, and unknown cocktails used in games of Rage Cage. She said it affected both her recall and her ability to fully interpret events, which makes sense because she weighed only 118 pounds. Bethany hung out with Maddie and Kaylee for a while in Kaylee's room, Blaker wrote. Bethany and Maddie took Murphy, Kaylee's dog, out to go to the bathroom between 0230 and 0300 hours. Bethany did not stay outside for very long as it was cold. Maddie then went to bed and watched a TV show to help her sleep, Baby Daddy. Blaker mistakenly reported that Maddie went to bed and watched Baby Daddy to help her sleep. It seems clearer he was actually talking about Funk. At around 0400 or 0420, he wrote, Bethany heard what she thought was a firework and saw a spark on the ground from under her door. Bethany then heard Murphy barking. Dylan called Bethany and stated she had seen someone in the house, and Bethany told her she could come down to her room and sleep with her. These generalized statements appear much more specific in transcripts. Bethany actually remembered considerable detail about the loud noise Blaker referred to as a firework, and she provided timestamps based on call, text, and Snapchat notifications on her phone. Dylan went to Bethany's room and went to bed, Blaker wrote. They woke up at around 1100 hours and talked to other friends who came over, and they checked on Xana and Ethan and found them deceased. Bethany originally called 911 and stated her friend was passed out and would not wake up. Despite the extraordinary number of questions this paragraph might inspire, Blaker, a sergeant, seems not to have asked for details or clarifications. Instead, he asked about and then reported on an incident earlier in the semester when Kaylee said she saw an unknown male near their house. In the following sentence, without any logical follow-up, he stated that Kaylee had broken up with her longtime boyfriend, Jack Ducour, approximately 3 months prior to the crime because she was moving to Texas. Bethany could not provide me with anything else at that point, Blaker wrote, adding that he swore under penalty of perjury pursuant to the law of the state of Idaho that the foregoing is true and correct. While it might make sense to compare statements made here with what Funk told Nunez on camera, it's not that easy. If we really want to get to the bottom of what she witnessed that night, we need to examine statements she made 3 days later and 700 miles away in the presence of a lawyer. As luck would have it, there are 2 different but equally interesting versions of this conversation. In one file, we read a report summarizing what the Idaho State Police report says about the 2 hours of conversation. In the other, we hear Funk speaking plainly in her own words, with every pause, stutter, and inflection recorded. We start with the former. On December 28, 2022, Moscow Police Department Detective Dustin Blaker filed Supplemental 90 with the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, summarizing a third interview of Bethany Funk. The interview was recorded, copied to a DVD, and booked into property, according to Blaker. A summary of the report of Funk's interview is here transcribed verbatim. On November 16, 2022, around 11:55 hours, I met with Bethany Funk at her attorney's office at 327 California Avenue, Reno, Nevada. Present during the interview, besides me and Bethany, were her attorney, Tom Valoria, and Matthew Wen, with the Nevada State Police Investigative Division. This was a follow-up interview with Bethany related to the homicide in Moscow, Idaho. I asked Bethany who had the front door code. Bethany told me the following people had the door code: Bethany Funk, Dylan Mortensen, Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Xander Knodel, Ethan Chapin, Jenna McClure, Claire Cirillo, Lakeland McComas, Hunter Johnson, Emily Alant, Josie Lauterin. I asked Bethany about Murphy's routine. Murphy was Kaylee's dog she had purchased when she was still dating Jack Ducour. Bethany stated Kaylee would primarily take Murphy out, but Maddie would also help. Bethany stated they never just left the door open because he would run away, so they would have to use a leash when they took him out. Bethany stated Murphy would not bark that often and was very friendly. Bethany stated Murphy would primarily sleep in Kaylee's room, and if Kaylee was not home, he would be left in the room. I asked Bethany if any of the girls who lived in the house had jobs. Bethany told me Maddie and Xana both worked at Mad Greek on Main Street. Bethany told me Kaylee worked for an online company and worked from home. Bethany did not know who the company was. Bethany told me Maddie also worked for an online company, but it was not the same company. Bethany said the company Maddie worked for was out of Boise, and during the summer, she had worked for them in their office in Boise. I asked Bethany about the drug use in the house and who used. Bethany told me Ethan and Xana both took Adderall when they drank alcohol. Bethany told me she saw Ethan and Xana both use Adderall the night before the murders. Bethany told me she saw Ethan take a pill and she saw Xana crush up a pill and snort it by using a rolled-up bill in her room. Bethany also said she thought Kaylee also used Adderall but was not sure. I asked Bethany if she has had any issues from any of the other people who live around them. Bethany stated, besides the 3 to 4 noise complaints they had, there were no other issues. Bethany told me Kaylee would look up who the registered sex offenders were who lived in the area. Bethany stated Kaylee had found a registered sex offender who lived close to them in the Blue Apartments on Queen. Kaylee stated he was older, in his 30s to 40s. Bethany stated Kaylee was looking at the sex offender registry within the week or so before the murders. Bethany stated Kaylee was into crime shows. Bethany stated there was nothing that happened to prompt her to look up the sex offender registry. I asked Bethany about the other two incidents where Kaylee had mentioned some weird things had happened. She told me about an incident at Winco where a male had followed her around the store, watched her check out, and then followed her to her vehicle. Xana was waiting in the vehicle. Bethany stated Kaylee said the male was African American and in his late 20s. Bethany felt it happened sometime before Halloween, so mid to late October. Bethany stated Kaylee purchased a case of White Claws for Xana. Bethany and her roommates had found the door open on November 4th at around 10:57, and they entered the house and grabbed golf clubs out of the west first floor bedroom. Bethany and the other roommates walked around the house with the golf clubs to check the house. Kaylee was not home for this incident as she had gone home for the weekend. Wind was blowing and the screws on the hinges were loose, and Xana's dad fixed it before he left that weekend. Kaylee told everyone about an incident where she saw a male watching her when she had taken Murphy out back to go to the bathroom. Bethany could remember when this happened, but she could not provide an actual day. Bethany stated she had been at a chapter meeting at the time Kaylee called them, asking them if they were going to be home soon. The following is a timeline of events November 12, 2022 to November 13, 2022. Bethany stated she was the last one in the house to wake up, and when she got up, Ethan was in the house in the living room with Kaylee. Dylan, Maddie, and Xana were all gone. Bethany felt she got up sometime between 10 and 11 in the morning. Bethany stated she checked her Find My Friends app and saw they were at Taco Bell at the time. Once Dylan, Maddie, and Xana got back, they started getting ready for the day. Kaylee, Dylan, Maddie, and Bethany were in Kaylee's room, and they were getting ready for a party at 621 Taylor Street, the Whites. The house belonged to Bianca, Sailor, and Kayla. The apartment is located on the second floor on the east side of the apartment building. Bethany stated this was between 11 to 12 in the afternoon. Bethany stated Kaylee left for the Whites before the rest of the group. Bethany stated she left at around 2 p.m. with Maddie, Dylan, Xana, Ethan, Hunter Johnson, Josie, Lyndon, Kai, Allie Benson, and Sky Speck. Bethany stated she started drinking at around 11:30 or 12 when still at 1122 King Road. She stated she was drinking mimosas and high noons throughout the night. Bethany also stated she also played a drinking game called Rage Cage later in the night. Bethany felt she drank a 12-pack of high noons during the night, 2 mimosas, and a standard wine glass. Bethany was unsure of what she had been drinking when she played Rage Cage. Bethany stated she was at the Whites up until around 15:48 hours when she left with Xana. Maddie, Kaylee, and Dylan stayed at the Whites. Ethan had left before her and Xana. Bethany and Xana went to Allie Benson's place somewhere on Taylor. Bethany and Xana left there at around 16:51 and went back to 1122 King Road. Bethany, Xana, Maddie, Kaylee, and Dylan were all at the house and made food. Ethan was not at the house during this time. At around 1800 hours, Bethany, Xana, Maddie, Kaylee, and Dylan all went to take a nap, and they all set alarms for 2000 hours. Bethany got up at 2000 hours. Once they all woke up, they got ready to go to the Sigma Chi's for a house party. Maddie and Bethany left first to go to Peter's apartment at Sigma Chi at around 2100 hours. Kaylee stayed home and was not going to go to the party at Sigma Chi. Ethan and Xana came over to the party after Bethany and Maddie. Dylan did not come with the rest and walked over at a later time. Maddie was not there for very long, and she went back to the house to go to the club with Kaylee. Bethany felt Maddie left sometime after 2109 hours. Bethany stated she walked home at around 0100 hours, and Dylan and Lakeland McComas were the only ones at the house. Bethany, Dylan, and Lakeland were watching Vampire Diaries for a while, and at around 01:22 hours, Lakeland left. Dylan went to her room after Lakeland left. At around 0200 hours, Kaylee and Maddie came home. Maddie, Kaylee, Dylan, and Bethany went up to Kaylee's bedroom once they got home. Kaylee was getting ready for bed as they were hanging out in her room. Bethany, Maddie, and Dylan went downstairs, and Maddie and Bethany took Murphy outside to let him go to the bathroom. Bethany only stayed outside for a short time, and she then went back into the house and put something away in her cupboard and grabbed a bag of chips. Bethany went downstairs to go to bed. Bethany stated nothing was unusual about Maddie and Kaylee's demeanor when they got home. Bethany stated they both appeared to be happy. Bethany said Maddie was highly intoxicated, and she had not seen her at that level of intoxication for a very long time. Bethany said when she went to bed, she was using her iPad to watch a TV show off of Hulu. Bethany said she was watching Baby Daddy. Bethany could not remember what episode she was watching or how long she was watching. As she was watching the show, Maddie came downstairs and asked her if she had Murphy with her because she could not find him. Bethany told her no. Bethany said her door was locked, and she normally locks her door when she goes to bed. Bethany told me she eventually turned off the show and her iPad and went to sleep. Bethany said she woke up after falling asleep to hearing what she felt was a firecracker go off, and she thought she saw a sparkler going off through the crack under her door. Bethany stated she did not know what happened. Either Bethany called Dylan or Dylan called Bethany, and Dylan stated she thought she had just seen someone dressed in all black in the house. Bethany said Xana had been wearing all black. Dylan responded by saying she thought he had a ski mask on. Bethany said she didn't really know what to say to what Dylan said. Bethany admitted both her and Dylan get scared easy. Bethany even thought maybe one of Ethan's frat brothers could have been playing a joke. Bethany told Dylan to come down to her room, and Dylan ran down to her room. Bethany tried calling Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan's phones, and nobody answered. Bethany said it was normal for Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan not to answer if they were sleeping if she called late at night. Bethany looked at her phone, and it showed Bethany called Dylan at 0419, and at 0420, Dylan called Bethany back. During the call, Bethany asked Dylan if she heard a firecracker, and Dylan said she did. Bethany could not recall if it was during this call where Dylan was talking about seeing someone in black walking in the house. Once Bethany and Dylan were in Bethany's room together, they continued to talk about what they heard and saw. Bethany told me Dylan said the male in black was walking out the back door and they had made eye contact with each other. Bethany said Dylan said the male was white with a big nose and that he was possibly holding a small vacuum-type object. Bethany and Dylan did not call 911 at the time because Bethany thought Dylan was imagining what she was talking about. Bethany stated both her and Dylan were both still drunk and they were very groggy. Bethany told me prior to hearing the firecracker, she thought she heard Murphy bark. She also heard what she thought was the beer pong table moving and cups falling. The beer pong table was located in the living room, which is above Bethany's bedroom. Bethany stated she was not sure what the sequence of events were for sure, but she knows she heard Murphy bark, the beer pong table, and then the firecracker first before she called Dylan to see if she had heard the same thing. Bethany told me she tried calling Xana and Maddie at 0421 and then tried calling Ethan at 0422. Bethany stated she tried calling Maddie, Kaylee, and Xana several more times once Dylan got into her room. Bethany told me when she went to bed, she remembers most of the lights being left on inside the house. Bethany told me after trying to contact the other roommates, she fell back to sleep and then woke up at around 0730 and tried calling her dad about her tooth. Bethany called her dad again at 0800, but there was no answer. Her house at 0801 with no answer, and then called her mom at 0802, and she answered and asked to talk with her dad. Her dad called back at 0809, and she talked with him and eventually took Advil for her tooth. Bethany then fell back to sleep. Bethany woke up at around 1100 hours and noticed no one else in the house was up. Bethany stated she knew this because Xana's Snapchat location was not on, and it should have been. Bethany and Dylan got scared because they should have been up. Bethany then called her friend Jenna and told her she and Dylan were scared and asked if she would come over and get them. Dylan then called Emily and asked her to come over. Dylan and Bethany knew Emily was with Hunter, so they knew he would come over with her. Hunter arrived at the house and came through the front door. Hunter went up the stairs first, and when she and Dylan went up the stairs, Hunter turned around and told Dylan and Bethany to get out of the house and to call for help. Bethany stated she could see Xana on the floor of her bedroom. Bethany said Xana was wearing underwear and a sweatshirt. Bethany stated the door was partially open, but she stated the door should normally be closed. Bethany called 911 and was trying to talk to the dispatcher, but was having a hard time talking. Bethany had to give the phone to her friend Josie so she could talk to the dispatch. I asked Bethany if she had ever seen Xana on the floor like she did that morning. Bethany told me she has never seen this, but has heard Xana would pass out on the floor in the past when she is highly intoxicated. Bethany told me Hunter went back into the house. Bethany could not remember if Josie and Emily went into the house. Bethany told me she believed Hunter grabbed a knife from the kitchen when he went back into the house. Bethany stated the police arrived as she was still on the phone and disconnected with dispatch. Bethany did not provide any further information related to this incident. It would be easy to imagine that among Bethany Funk's 4 statements to police, her November 16 recollections would be the most accurate. The Reno interview was conducted 700 miles from the crime scene in the safety of a non-confrontational setting with assurances that she was nothing more than a witness. At that point in the investigation, events would still have been fresh in her mind, and she likely had the benefit of several nights' sleep. She would have received emotional support from friends and family, far from the press conferences and media frenzy descending on Moscow. She would have had the luxury of trying to make sense of things with friends like Hunter Johnson, Emily Allant, and Lyndon Beck, refreshing her memory about what led up to and then followed the crimes. She would have spent a second night with Dylan, sharing a motel room once their house was sealed off by police. It did not hurt that she had an attorney who sat with her through every question. Not only had a madman crept into her own house in the middle of the night to butcher 4 of her friends, but he had also left her unharmed before escaping without a trace. Police had no suspect at that point, no motive, no leads, no real sense of what had happened. The community was scared. The campus had closed for Thanksgiving. The entire country was starting to respond with questions and dismay. From December 3, 2022 through January 23, 2023, I, Idaho State Police Detective Joe Lake, had been communicating with surviving victim Bethany Funk's attorney, Thomas Valoria, for victimology investigation needs about the quadruple murder on November 13, 2022 at 1122 King Road, Moscow, Latah County, Idaho. Detective Lake wrote, his report of investigation, titled Supplemental 152, was filed February 23, 2023, approximately 4 months after the crimes. This was almost 7 weeks after authorities held a press conference announcing the indictment and arrest of a Washington State PhD candidate in criminology. On December 20, 2022, national news outlets released arrest information and an image of suspect Brian C. Koberger, he wrote. Also on December 30, 2022, Valoria sent Latah County prosecuting attorney Bill Thompson an email stating, quote, so glad an arrest was made, Bethany does not recognize the online photo of the person arrested and has never heard of him, end quote. There is no way to tell if Detective Lake's 2-month lag in contacting Funk suggests obfuscation. or if one more interview would have proven helpful. Bethany said she never saw or came into contact with the murderer, so it is understandable that she was not asked to view a photo spread of suspects. Lake did not explain, however, why a victimology team would have no further questions about the masked intruder Dylan saw leaving the house at 4:20 a.m. carrying a vacuum. The two women had spent 8 hours locked in a room together after all. Perhaps they had discussed details that might help tie Koberger to the victims. If we go simply by Lake's report, he seemingly had no interest in Bethany's possible connections to Washington State, the town of Pullman, or any of Koberger's known associates. He did not ask about a pool party where it was alleged that Koberger might have interacted with one of the victims. Lake did not indicate why he accepted a 2-sentence email from Funk's attorney without requesting face-to-face comment. He simply wrote, "No additional information was required of Funk from the victimology team." In the end, there is no way to know if a sit-down with Bethany might have helped answer unresolved questions. Once Blaker and Wen finished their interview on November 16, Bethany Funk appeared to never again meet with or be questioned by investigators until called to a grand jury. Her testimony there has been sealed and lies outside the reach of this author. Regardless, what we do know at this point is that information Bethany Funk provided November 16 to Blaker and Wen was far more extensive than previously reported. We know that Funk's interview was recorded, burned to a DVD, and entered into evidence. We know that during more than 2 hours of conversation, she offered critically important details that appear not to have been adequately probed, understood, or even mentioned by police. Fortunately, we now have the recordings and transcripts. It is time to look back on what detectives might have missed. So, just real quick, just so I can say on this recording, who is all here? Blaker says in his opening statement. He sounds casual for a homicide detective. This is clearly not an interrogation. So, myself, Sergeant Blaker with the Moscow Police Department, and then I have Sergeant Matthew Wen with the Nevada, it's technically now the Nevada State Police Investigation Division, Wen clarifies, commonly and affectionately referred to as NDI. So, then Bethany Funky? He pronounces it Funky, but Bethany corrects him. Funka, she says. Funka, sorry about that. That's okay. Here with me is her attorney, Tom Valoria, the lawyer says. Yeah, we're at 327 California Avenue, Reno, and the transcriber at the time is approximately 11:55. This interview begins so casually, it sounds like a coffee shop chat. So there's a lot of different types of questions I'm going to be asking today, Blaker says. I'm not here just to go back through another timeline again. Bethany agrees. Based on our investigation, we now have some other things that we kind of want to get some information on. And we're hoping that this is something you can provide to us, okay? So I'm actually going to start with those questions first, and then at the end, we're going to go back over your timeline a little bit better, okay? Bethany says. Then Detective Blaker launches into more than 90 minutes of what I view as largely inane softballs about everything except the murders. He asks about the day-to-day routines of the house. He establishes that Bethany moved in at the beginning of the school year, that Ethan often stayed with Xana, but lived alone near a 76 gas station at the other end of town. He asks about Eric the Uber driver, boyfriends, and love interests, and then several people by name, including Jack Showalter, Ethan Runge, Connor Chestnut, Cole Berenberg, and Christian Gonzalez, quote, whose name just came up. At the 32-minute mark, Blaker establishes that Maddie and Xana worked at the Mad Greek. 44 minutes into the interview, he asks about neighborhood sex offenders. After almost 2 hours, the questioning finally turns to events leading up to the murders. Do you have any idea? Detective Wen interjects at the 143 mark on the tape. Thinking a little bit more, based on what you know is in your house, what that firecracker could have been, that firecracker sound, and the sparkle could have been. As a Nevada State Police detective, with no specific jurisdiction, he has acted as a silent observer throughout most of the interview. But he's finally had enough. Details about what Bethany heard and saw that morning remain a mystery to this day. And like everyone else, Wen wants answers. Once he gets involved, the inquiry turns logical, incisive, and pertinent. I really have no idea, Bethany tells him. I have no idea where it came from or what it could have been. Well, in addition, you told him you heard the pong table slide on the floor like someone had bumped into it. Mm-hmm, Bethany agrees. Or the cups fall or something. You heard what? Either cups fall off it or the table move to the side. Is that right over your room? Blaker asks. Yeah. Do you remember what position the beer pong table was in before you went to bed? Either it was just like that, like straight, Bethany explains. It sounds like she's demonstrating with her hands. Coming from, when asked, the kitchen, Bethany says. It's right in front of it. So, not off to the side a little bit, when asked, a little bit like that? No, not unless someone moved it to get past it or something, she says. Was it normally in that position? Yeah. So if I were to walk from your kitchen and Dylan's area of the house, there's the step up. Uh-huh, she says. And I walk into the living room area, it's going to be literally right in front of me, so kind of centered in the door. Pretty much, or a little bit to the side of the door so some people can get through, but to the right or to the left? The right, she says. So it would be pushed to the right? It would be pushed to the left, she clarifies, toward the wall. Okay, so where that little nightstand is. Blaker is referring to the brass console, but he's probing a wider issue. If the killer was chasing Xana from the kitchen to her bedroom, attacking her with a knife as the forensics prove, how did two wildly animated adults navigate the 6-inch step and a 6-foot table? How did the deadly attack rage through the living room, violently transferring blood from Maddie, Kaylee, and Xana to the walls without disturbing a lightweight plastic table blocking the only imaginable path? It's an obvious question no one else had asked. Yes, she says. Okay, Blaker says, because it wasn't straight when they found it. It was kind of crooked a little bit. So what you're saying makes sense to me now. This does not appear to be correct. The table was aligned in Nunez body cam video. Blaker must have seen it during Talbot's search when the table was moved slightly so detectives could move past it. Mm-hmm, she says. So, Wen jumps in, I'm not familiar with the house, so your room is on the bottom floor. So is there a set of steps, a half set of steps? There's a full set of steps, Bethany says. So, 12 steps-ish? 14, Blaker tells him. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. And when you get to the bottom of the steps, where is your room? If I was walking, there's one room straight across, but no one lives in there. There's a bathroom right next to it. And if you go down the little hallway, that's my room. So, for something to be, reflecting underneath your door, you'd have to have something basically down in that hallway, Blaker clarifies. Yeah, that's what it would seem like to me. I couldn't tell what it was. At that point, the questioning veers off on tangents about where visitors might have placed their beer cans and about unresolved stains on the floor. Bethany is asked about lighting, but doesn't remember details. She answers a few questions about her walk home, stating that she saw no unusual cars, that she walked in through the front door. It was cold and foggy. She told me she thought it was a mini vacuum, Bethany responds when asked what Dylan told her about the intruder and the object he was carrying. She said it was like something wrapped around or something. And then a mini vacuum? So something wrapped around his waist? I don't know, she says. Yeah. When asked about what first alarmed her, prompting calls to friends, then 911, Bethany seems uncertain. She says she did not go upstairs to check on her housemates, but did in fact call their phones. We were kind of freaking out because we were they would have been up by now. And then I called my friend Jenna and told her we were scared and didn't know what was happening. And so she offered to come get us. And then we called Emily because we knew that Hunter was with her. and he would come over and help look around the house. No one asked why she suddenly felt scared so long after Dylan showed up in her room. The only last question I have, Blaker says, just before ending the interview, are you still communicating with Kaylee? Dylan. Yeah, Bethany says, a little. Do you know why she's very hesitant to talk to me right now? Bethany responds, meaning no. Blaker does not ask Bethany why she arrived with a lawyer of her own, though she had never been mentioned as a person of interest. And though we'll return to details of this interview later, one thing bears mention. When asked about electronic devices the roommates might have used in the house, Bethany said Dylan owned and used an Alexa. She kept it in her room next to her bed. Those who think police might have seized on this as a potentially valuable lead would be mistaken. Neither Blaker nor anyone else has ever expressed any interest in the device or speculated that due to its location, it might have recorded the whole thing. Based on recordings and reports, it appears that police never asked Dylan about the Alexa or where she kept it. A review of body camera footage, photographs, search warrant inventories, and dozens of interviews discloses no evidence of the device. If there was an Alexa in Dylan's room at the time of the crimes, no record of it or the data it captured has been found.
Okay, y'all. I'm going to stop there so that I can go finish or do my live on TikTok. I'm later than I thought. I was going to do it at 7:30, but I didn't want to end this chapter in the middle, so I went ahead and let it play. That's a good question, Missy. Good question. All right, y'all. I'm going to get off of here. So we got through 3 more chapters. Tonight. These chapters are longer. We have 3 to go. The next one is an hour and 10 minutes. Then 49 minutes. Then 51 minutes. Yeah. All right, y'all. I will see y'all on TikTok, or I'll see y'all here when I do this again. Bye, everybody.